Hey, it's Two Geek Soup. If you guys only knew how much fun we have already had in the last oh my gosh, it's been like 40 minutes already trying to get this all up and running. So much, it's been a blast. It's always fun when I get to talk to my good friend Jeff Mitchell.
Hi guys and gals.
Sure, there's probably some gals in there somewhere. Who knows? Oh, I know we do have at least one. Confirmed gal listener. We do have one. Hi Lou. Thanks for being a listener now. She bopped in onto the Discord from a Facebook post that I did, and as far as I can tell, she's the only one so far. But everybody who's listening should join the Discord. Even if you don't use Discord yet, you should download Discord just to be on the Two Geek Soup Discord server, because it is harmonious and wonderful, unlike most other places on the internet.
Guys, listen, if you're not a Discord person, I was avidly anti-Discord like I am with most social media. I just didn't want to bother. And eventually, because of somebody I watch on Twitch, I joined the Discord, and I've never regretted it. Now I'm on probably a dozen Discords, which is a small number compared to most people. And yeah, so I have two forms of social media, is Twitch and Discord, and that's it. And my life is very, very simple and peaceful, and I love it.
Fantastic. All right, well, we're gonna continue to love life as we together join forces to absolutely savage the MCU stinker Eternals.
No, I'm in love with this movie. I forgot to tell you, John. I've fallen in love with the movie. It's terrible.
In the last 20 minutes, you've fallen in love with it?
No, I was keeping this a secret.
Oh, okay.
So, I do have a fondness for it. Because it's so terrible.
Oh, alright, so it's one of those, it's so bad it's good kind of situations for you?
Kind of, but I find I'm one of those people who, the more people talk about how terrible something is, the more I like it.
There's just that intrinsic contrarian streak.
Yes, I think that's really where it is. If there's a new Pokemon that comes out that everybody hates, I will love that thing so much just because people hate it. I don't even like it at the beginning. I agree with them at first, and then slowly I'm like, you know what? I like this little ugly piece of crap, and I'm going to use it, and everybody's going to hate it. But it makes me smile.
Oh. Well, there are all sorts of things that you could use this movie for. Torturing terrorists. Or if you needed a pile of something to run your bulldozer over, I could recommend a pile of Eternals DVDs, for instance.
John, somebody poured their heart and soul into this movie. I just want to remind you.
Well, those people did a bad job. I'm so sorry. I'm glad they got paid. But yeah, man,
so I have sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Go for it. No,
I'd like to start out by talking about the things I love about this movie.
Yes, let's start with that. Fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to go. So
okay, but before we do that, as per usual, I do like to bring the comics lore into it as an intro.
Okay. By the way, if you don't know, we're talking about Eternals. I don't know if we mentioned that yet.
I did.
Oh, okay.
I did.
Never mind.
Yep. So Eternals are a creation of Jack Kirby, who is one of the, most legendary, comics creators ever. And it's definitely some of the most high concept, Marvel stuff that has ever been, really. The Eternals were a creation of the Kree, and they were doing just genetic tinkering, and so they ended up with the Eternals and also the Deviants, and over time, all sorts of wacky cosmic, hijinks have ensued. Really, it's too much to get into. But the one thing that's really interesting about the Eternals is that Kirby reused a lot of these same concepts when he went over to DC and created the New Gods. And that all has a lot of the same kind of cosmic, mythology-based sort of things going on with it. Because as in the movie, so in the comics, you also have this idea that the Eternals have been around for a long time on Earth, and there are sort of echoes of them throughout history, with Ajax, and Athena as Athena, and Icarus as Icarus, and so on. They sort of made a little bit of a resurgence back in the early 2000s. Neil Gaiman wrote a really cool Eternals miniseries. And, of course, they tried to tie the comics into the movies a little bit and brought the Eternals back for a whole team-up / battle with the Avengers and the X-Men and all that stuff. So those comics are kind of cool. I really would especially recommend reading the Neil Gaiman run on it, because Neil Gaiman is always awesome, and it's John Romita Jr. did the art, and I always like him as well. So yeah. All right, Jeff, go ahead. What did you love about the movie?
So you kind of touched on some of it already, and the thing I love the most is just the mythology and the lore that's going on throughout this movie. Kind of like in the background of our history as human beings, how they sort of set this up. And basically, I love it when you have stories that sort of have a alternate explanation of our actual, like, human mythologies and things like that. I love, I don't know, there's the whole, like, reimagining of the universe with the Celestials and how they're sort of, creating these galaxies and things like that, and sometimes sacrificing planets to do so, and they've created these beings who are kind of like gods to humans, right? Or potentially like angels, in the Judeo-Christian religion, and then like gods in the Greek and Hebrew, or not Greek and Hebrew. I'm not talking about languages of the Bible. Sorry. In the Greek and Roman mythology and things like that. Right. And just how, it sort of sets up this backdrop to the story that we're familiar with, but it's like telling a new like twist on it. So I really like that.
And I'll be honest, like visualizing some of the ancient, parts of ancient history was pretty cool. I liked the sequences that were set in Babylon.
Yes.
And like seeing, a visualization of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon was really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely seeing that stuff going on was cool. And I know there was something else I liked. Just trying to remember what it was. I actually, so my experience with the movie was that first and foremost, John told me not to watch it, which made me want to watch it. I was talking with him about like that I hadn't really kept up with Marvel since Endgame, and had seen some stuff, and I was like, I think I'm just gonna go through what's been released. And I was like listing off the movies. I was like, Eternals, and he's like, yeah, you can skip that one. And so of course that made me want to watch it, and so I made my way up to it, and I told him, I was like, I'm about to watch Eternals, and he's like something like, oh boy, buckle up. And I had to take a break halfway through because
because
by
it's
the middle of the
long
movie,
too.
I just kept, there was so many things where I was like, why do I care about this? And I got to the middle of the movie and I literally said out loud, my head in my hands, I do not care anymore. And I had to stop and go do something else. And I came back to it either the next day or a few hours later. I can't remember. But
that's funny.
But the second half, I actually enjoyed a lot better than the first. I will say that the action sequences were really good. The fight at the end between Icarus and the rest of the Eternals had some really cool stuff in it.
That's true.
Usually for me, I don't know if it's just me. I know there's other people like this, but a lot of times in action movies, I don't really care about the action. So I'm in it to see the resolution of the story, the character development, things like that. So a lot of times I kind of just like zone out during the action. I'm like, yeah, they're throwing punches, blah, blah, Right. But this had some really cool stuff in it. I'm thinking about, who was the guy, the inventor guy,
Phastos.
the Eternal? Yeah, Phastos. His fight with Icarus was really cool.
Yeah,
it is very seldom that I'm actually like riveted with a fight, like actually paying close attention to it. But that was very cool.
Yeah, I mean, there are interesting things about that fight because obviously Icarus is like, in sort of like raw terms, like much more powerful than any of the others. For no reason that the film can be bothered to explain. By the way, he just
that is one of my criticisms too. They just set things down in front of you, and they're like, "This is how it is."
Exactly.
Like, okay, well, I guess that's how it is. But why do I care? And also, why?
Right. So, but like the inventiveness of like the way that he counters and attacks and all of that stuff is cool. Yeah, like there's definitely like that fight scene is pretty good. I'll agree to that.
Yeah. And I liked, so the weird thing is as a whole, watching the movie was not a highly enjoyable experience. But after the end of the movie, I wanted to see the sequel, which seems weird. But the way that they left things with some other Eternals from off-Earth coming in, and I can't remember some other details, but the way that they
Dane
left
Whitman.
things made me want to see. Oh, so you had the whole, Celestial that's. I can't remember his name. See, this is how much I don't care. They didn't make me care, as I don't remember names of characters,
Arishem or
yes,
Tiamat.
Arishem. So Arishem takes them away and is like basically saying he's going to come back and judge Earth at some point.
Yeah.
And I want to know what happens to them after that, and then I want to know what happens with this, these other Celestials that show up and sort of seem to have an agenda or a mission that I'm very curious about.
You mean the other Eternals?
Yes.
Yeah. Star Fox and Pip
the ones
the Troll.
who show up like in the post credit scene. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's funny because as many people hold this opinion, it's like probably the worst MCU film, but it still made me want to see what's coming next. So that's a positive for it.
Sure. Like yes, that is a positive thing about it, but also like it kind of just speaks to the failure of the movie as a whole.
That's
right?
true.
That like this feels like the prelude to something that I might actually be interested in.
Yes, and that's exactly what I came. That's a perfect way of putting how I felt. It's like this was an origin story, and it feels like what comes next is going to be way more interesting and hopefully like better done, because the real problem with it is there's a great story there. It just wasn't well told. Like it seemed like they don't know how to tell a story. They're telling a story in the way that a 12-year-old tells a story, where they just like, like I said, they're just like, there's elements there, or another way that they've thought about it, because ironically, as much as it was painful to watch, and as much as I don't care about it, I spent a lot of time thinking about it, probably because I knew we were going to do this episode, but...
Right.
So there are a couple ways, like analogies I came up with. One, it feels like a very immature way of telling a story. The kind of stories that I would probably write myself, because I know I'm not good at writing stories. Or I haven't put enough effort in, I guess, to get good.
Uh-huh.
It feels like that. Like the things you would write when you were in like 5th grade,
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's just very blunt. Like, and then, you're writing this story and here's Bobby, and Bobby's a cool kid, and then his best friend shows up, and his best friend's the strongest one of their group,
Right.
And also Bobby's in love with this person, this other character. They introduce a character, and by the way, they're in love. That's the way this was told,
Yeah.
And then the other way I looked at it was, it kind of felt like, at least as far as putting the movie together with cinematic elements and stuff, it felt like it was put together by an AI that doesn't know that has like a intellectual understanding of what human beings like, but has no actual connection to what they like. So it's like they put this stuff together. It's like, okay, really cool action sequences, you like this. This kind of humor, you like that.
Right.
And you like stories that have to do with space and, higher beings and superheroes duking it out. You like all these things. We're going to mash them into a movie and then wonder why you don't like it. Like, you should like it. I imagine this AI being like, okay, human, here is what you like. You like love interests and romance. You like some dramatic tension between characters. You like you like betrayal and retribution. You like lots of characters. You like characters with superpowers. You like fights. And, and then it's like, and here, we're giving it to you. Now eat it and enjoy it, human. Why do you have a grimace on your face, human? These are the things you like.
Yeah, like, that's definitely good. Oh, here's the other thing that you like. You like diversity.
Oh, yes, you like diversity. Yeah.
And so we're going to give you all the diversity you can handle for absolutely no reason.
All the diversity boxes, which
boxes,
like that doesn't really bother me that much. I don't mind seeing
like,
that, but it is.
I don't care about seeing it. I don't care about seeing it, but my problem with it in this movie is there's no reason for it. Like, it does. Like, none of these characters are represented in a way that actually does any justice to the communities that they come from.
Yes, that's a good point, yeah.
Like, Makari is deaf. Why? Who cares why? She's deaf, and we're representing deaf people. Like,
yeah, it kind of did feel like that a little bit.
And it's like that for every minority, or like, you know, whatever different kind of identity that you want to have there. Like,
ham-fisted was another term that kept coming into my mind when I was watching it. Like, it's just like, bam, here's this. Here's, it's like we have all the ingredients for a great cake, and we just threw them together and mixed them up and did no cooking, baking whatsoever. And then wondered why the cake didn't turn out.
It's like, you can't just drink the cake ingredients through a straw and expect it to be a good cake.
Unless it's cookie dough. I mean, then it's not through a straw, but then, it's better.
That's
better
true.
Without cooking.
Yeah. So I disliked this movie already, and watching it again, like, I went from this is the Marvel movie I like the least to I actively dislike this movie now. because, like, and like, I don't expect. Okay, I'm gonna try and figure out how I want to say this. Like, as a Christian, I don't expect things that are made in Hollywood to like line up with what I believe. Like, so and anybody who's listened to the show already knows that I'm not the kind of like finger wagging, fundamentalist, church lady, whatever. But as I was watching this movie this time, it feels almost like it was created in a lab to like maximally piss off every Christian that it possibly could.
I could see that.
Because like even like from the very first frame, they're like subverting the biblical story of creation. Like, in the beginning, the Celestials created, before there was even the Big Bang, before the Infinity Stones, like there was the Celestials, and like, wow, okay. So, like we're a long ways away from Cap saying there's only one God, ma'am, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I kind of came away with that this story was put together by somebody who really dislikes the idea of God.
Yeah. Yeah, because not only are we... Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, which, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Okay.
Sorry.
So not only are we, like, subverting the biblical story, we're also, like, creating an entire narrative where, like, the God figure is absolutely the bad guy. And, like, there are going to be multiple, like, not even really subtle allusions to, basically equating Arishem with, like, essentially with the God of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
It's like, his ways are archaic and barbaric, and like, and also I think it can't be a coincidence that the name Arishem sounds a lot like the name that actually, like, in Hebrew they use for God, which is just the name, which is Yishem. Like, that's not a coincidence.
So there's two reasons why this didn't really bother me. One is that, which I know you do this too, so I'm not saying you don't, but when I go into something like this, I look at it as a completely fantasy story that is not actually connected to our real world. So somebody's not saying, like, this is what reality is. So I hold that in my mind as one thing. So I understand that, and I know you do too, John. But the other thing is that what I realized, so I did feel that sort of twinge, probably like you do, that it's like, ooh, this guy really, or this person, whoever's writing this, really has a problem with God or Christianity. But then I realized it's like, this is basically a depiction of God the Father without Jesus.
Yeah, sure.
Like, it is what God the Father would appear like to us humans without Jesus. Like, I would probably feel the same way if God the Father had not become human himself and gone through the things that he is, quote, putting the humans through, to A, identify with us, and B, give us an example of an example of righteousness, but also an example of he's willing to experience everything we do in the world that he's created, right, to a higher degree than we do. Like, more sorrow, more love, more damnation that he experienced on the cross than we are going to feel. Yeah. Especially as believers, obviously we're not going to feel that, but I think even more than any single unbeliever will feel. You know, because Jesus
Sure.
was experiencing the entire wrath of God, right?
Yeah.
So and that to me is what, like, so to me it felt like, yeah, I think you're right though. I was about to say it felt like this person has a problem with all religion, but that's not true, because the Greek gods, the pagan gods, so to speak, were depicted in a good light, and the Judeo-Christian God was depicted in a negative light. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and like, you know, and the sort of the wedding ceremony between Circe and Icarus was very like, you know, was a beautiful thing, you know, and yeah, all sorts of right, whatever. Sorry. Blah. I'm great at this.
Listen, we already talked about how this episode is going to be just as scuffed as the movie, like trying to get this together with technical difficulties. So, just so you know, this episode's held together by glue and duct tape. And,
it sure is.
Yeah, it's just like the movie.
A little bit. Yeah, and like you said, you know, there's so much here that is that's just like plopped down in front of you, like as the fact of the matter, and you're expected just to like roll with it. And even if, I mean, even if that wasn't the case, like you still have 10 main characters that are being introduced to you for the very first time. Mm-hmm. And somehow you're supposed to like keep track of who they all are, like somehow like care about any of them.
Yep, care about them, which they don't do a good job. There's no human connection to these characters.
So okay, so I would say yes, mainly, except in one instance, like I feel like the character that you could most sympathize with is probably Sprite.
Yeah,
like,
maybe.
because she is like longing for the kind of connection that she like can never have. Mm-hmm. And I think at some time in our lives or another, like everybody feels that. Like everybody feels alone or like disconnected or like there's something wrong with them that's making it harder for them to connect with the rest of the world. And many times, as Sprite does, a person could say, "Why did God make me this way?"
Yeah.
And
I've said that before.
Yeah. And like and this movie, and it's, for me, it's one of the worst failures of this movie, that it has the temerity to raise that question and not even feint towards an answer. Like, it doesn't even have enough courage in its convictions to even attempt to take that question seriously.
I think it did give an answer. It's just not a good answer. The answer was because he's an
Oh, well, okay. Yes. Well, and okay, but that like sure, but that tracks with, you know, the way that the rest of this movie is put together and the story that's being told here about what any sort of God must be. Yeah. Because that's just all it is. It's like it's an AI that was coached by Richard Dawkins that's putting the movie together. You know, like, God is a monster. Like, there's nothing good about any sort of religion ever, and like, just throw it all away and live your own life in the way that is good for you. Because that was sort of like, that was presented as like the happy ending for their characters, right? Is that like they destroyed the deviants, And so now they can go and make whatever meaning for themselves that they want to do. Like, it's it's like the absolute, like, existentialist, humanist, like, dream.
It's all you have. I mean, that's totally understandable, because it's all you have if you have a creator God and no Jesus. Like, I can't really fault them for where they ended up, given their presuppositions.
Well, I can, because it's lazy.
Okay.
It's a hack job. Like, it's not even like an interesting version of presenting that question, because with any good villain, right? With any good villain, you understand a little bit about why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe there's like sort of an attempt towards giving it some sort of reason that, like, in the greater scheme of everything, but like it's so facile, it's so like it's such a straw man version of like what the writer thinks a Christian would say when presented with the problem of evil.
It definitely is a straw man of God, of like the Christian God, for sure. Yeah.
Like, there's just so many points all through this thing where like you just see what's happening and you go like, why?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? Like, Makari and Druig, like, have a relationship, it turns out, like 3/4 of the way through the movie. Why? Who knows? Just because. Like, just because.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any bearing on the story. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But because.
So the beginning had me a little bit interested, because they had an element of mystery in there, which always pulls you in, right? You want to understand the why. So, what's happening? Why are the deviants coming back? There seems to be this, I'm even forgetting character names now. So who was the one that Icarus killed, and you didn't know that he killed her?
Ajax.
Yeah, so you get this idea. They sort of hint at, like, Ajax has this, connection to the Celestial, and there's Arishem, and there's some sort of, ulterior motive or something else going on, right? And you're kind of following along with what's her butt. See, like, I can't even remember a character. Yeah, Cersei. You're following along with her and, like, her discovering, and so it's kind of holding my interest because I want to see where this is going. And then, like, 1/3 of the way through the movie, it's just she meets with Arishem and he just lays the whole thing out. Yeah. And now I have no reason to want to watch any further. And that was close to the point where I was just like, why do I care now? I don't care about this anymore. Like, the world is ending. They need to stop it. Okay, but why do I... There's no more mystery. There's so many... And, like, we had talked about before when I initially talked to you about this, it's kind of like... I haven't seen this movie, but you have. But it's kind of like that one DC movie where... the general consensus is there's a good movie in there somewhere. It just needed to be edited better. And it was the one with, like, the Joker and Harley Quinn and...
Suicide Squad.
Suicide Squad, yeah. Because that's I heard that from a couple other people. And I felt that way about this. Is like there's...
Suicide Squad is also a hot mess.
Yeah, there's like a good movie in there somewhere. And it just needed to be stitched together differently.
Yeah, at least in this movie, all of the characters are the same character from scene to scene. In Suicide Squad, some of the characters seem to be like a completely different version of that character, like in the next scene. Yeah. Oh, it's very, very bad.
Okay. Yeah. So, and kind of an example of this is just like, I mean, I was saying why from like the very beginning of the movie, like. Right. It opens up with this Star Wars-esque, like, screen-scrolling, narrative. And I feel like that is something that most filmmakers have learned is not the best way to start a movie. Like, the only reason it worked for Star Wars is because it was 1978, or whenever the first one came out. And it was
I think kind that's right.
The first time somebody had done something like this, and it was the 70s, and people enjoyed reading more than we do now, and and the only reason it continued in like episodes 7, 8, and 9 is because that's how the first one started in the 70s,
right? But because that's what Star Wars does.
Because that's what, and so they sort of did it with this, and I'm like reading it, and I'm like, okay, I think I get it. And then they show these people getting hooked up to some energy and saying it is time, and then they go to Mesopotamia, and you don't know, like, it's and they're like talking they're like moving and talking very stately and like, almost pretentious, like they're, in that one scene, and then they go to present day, and all of a sudden they're talking like modern day, and they don't explain why or how, which I sort of like made my own headcanon, and it's like, okay, if you're on this world long enough, you start acting like the people you're around, and so they would essentially just look and sound like whoever they're living with at the time. That kind of makes sense. Oh yeah,
but it was something that I had to that's the least nonsensical thing about the whole movie.
Right, but it's an example of one of those things where every 5 or 10 minutes or so you have to sit here and have an internal dialogue with yourself to reconcile what you just saw with some sort of reality in the movie.
Like the real question about that sequence is, why are they speaking English to each other as they go towards ancient Mesopotamia?
Yeah, that too. I mean, I didn't even think about that because that happens a lot. But I guess what I'm getting at is like I could think of, just off the top of my head, a few different ways to tell the story that would be more interesting. One of which is, okay, so have a character that we can identify with. So maybe a non-eternal, which they did have one. They had Cersei's love interest, but we didn't have any connection to him. So, for example, if you start the movie with that person, a thought that popped into my head was you have some archaeologist that's discovering some very interesting things of these ancient Mesopotamian ruins, and they're discovering ancient texts that are alluding to
Sorry, these... you know why this is hilarious, Jeff? Because that's literally how the first issue of the Eternals comics begins.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm a comic genius.
You're a freaking mastermind.
Yeah, like finding evidence of deviance and things, and then trying to figure out what's going on. Maybe find some prophecies of the Earth going to end and this giant thing coming out of it. And this and you can have some personal connections thrown in there. This person has people around them that they love and care about. Children or a spouse or something. And you connect with that person, and then you one by one start, or 1 by 2, or however, start introducing these dozen other Eternals, and introducing them in a way where instead of just plunking it down and saying this is how it is, you show how it is subtly.
Yeah.
And
wait, you mean like show, not tell? You mean like the most basic tenet of filmmaking?
Yes. And you bring that, so in the first 5 minutes of what I just off the top of my head laid out, you have a character that you identify with.
Yeah. And
you have mystery. And the movie takes you down this path through their eyes of discovering what's going on. And, it's not until right before the climax of the movie that you discover, oh, holy crap, there's a celestial hatching out of the earth. What are we going to do? and then the Eternals do what they're gonna do, and Icarus has his betrayal, and that part, so the themes that the director was playing with, that I think her name is Chloe Zhao, was playing with. I love the theme she was playing with, was the whole, like, are we actually doing the right thing? And some of us think we are, and some of us think we aren't. Some of us think the greater good of the universe is worth sacrificing a planet of intelligent beings for. I can actually see how that makes sense,
Yeah, sure.
And then I can also see why, but we don't want to do that because, these people...
Because we love them.
Yeah, because we love these people, and they should have a chance at living life like anybody else. Like, live their lives out, etc. And, so, like, and those themes of, like, questioning whether, what you've basically grown up, for them it was, millennia, believing is true or right, or, are we doing the right thing? Those things, I think, I love talking about that, thinking about that stuff, and a lot of other people do too, which brings me to, well, I'll get to that in a second. So after I watched the movie, I was interested in seeing, like, how other people responded to it, like, basically how well it did at the box office, which I was surprised it did, like, really well at the box office.
Well, I mean, that's not super surprising because it was a Marvel movie, and people are gonna go see the next Marvel movie. I mean, that's just a fact of life right now.
But one of the things, so this is kind of going back to what we were saying before. So one critic, Robbie Collin, wrote that the film was, quote, constantly engaged in a kind of grit-toothed authenticity theater, going out of its way to show you it's doing all the proper things cinema does, even though none of them bring any discernible benefit.
Yes.
And that basically described how I felt. But what I thought was interesting, and what I was going to say, is a couple of the... so this is off of Wikipedia. That the mixed reception surprised some commentators. Okay, so this is... I want to see what you think of this, because I think he's not correct. But I want to see what you think. So this is Richard Newby of The Hollywood Reporter wrote that, quote, much of the criticism of Kirby's work, unquote, which is divisive for its subject matter and relationship to the wider Marvel Universe, quote, has followed Zhao in her adaptation, unquote. He compared the divisive response to that of Zack Snyder's DC Extended Universe films Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman, writing that they and Eternals share, quote, a deconstructive approach to superheroes and force them to question their purpose in the world through meditative and melancholy narrative beats and a tragic yet hopeful ending, unquote. This approach, he felt, subverted critics' and audiences' expectations, which made them review the film more harshly. I don't think that's why people reviewed the film harshly. And I don't think it's why they also reviewed Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman harshly. I think those were for similar reasons. Okay, so I think that people do resonate with Jack Kirby's sort of... If this is true that this is what Jack Kirby did, I don't really know. But the whole deconstructive approach and questioning their purpose in the world, I think people like seeing movies like that.
Yeah, like the complexity of the story and like the complexity of the protagonist is always an interesting thing. And like that's what Marvel has always done better than DC, is like having people with superpowers rather than like these like larger than life, iconic figures who just sort of like stride through the world, as forces for unalloyed good.
Right.
Your Superman, your Wonder Woman, and there are DC characters that have nuance and stuff as well. Like Green Arrow has a lot of was like big on like social commentary and everything, and like it's not as though it's not all like stuff from that's cut from the same cloth as like the original Superman stuff from the 30s. No, it's later than that. Because he just had 85. So, like, the 40s. Late 30s, early 40s. But, yeah, that's what Marvel has always been known for, is, like, being a little bit more grounded and more about the actual people who just happen to have superpowers. And so, like, that's definitely a sort of a storytelling heritage that potentially could be drawn upon with this, but, like, it's just bungled so colossally, and you don't actually get a sense of, like, who these people really are. Like, none of them have the kind of complexity that we see in even just other parts of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like Tony Stark, for instance. Or, you know, the character art that Steve Rogers goes through. Or, you know, the way that we see Peter Parker grow in the different movies that he's in. Or any of the other characters. Natasha, Barton, like, they all, you see them all grow in different ways throughout the things that they're in. Freaking Loki. I mean, come on.
Oh my gosh, Loki's gone through such a character arc.
Yeah. And, like, they sort of, you know, we'll talk about the Loki show another time. Like, it's a little bit of a cheat to make the alternate universe, alternate timeline Loki basically be the same as the Loki that sacrificed himself in Infinity War. But without, you know, back to the point, like you get the actual character growth with these people because, like, you're given time to sit with them. Right. And, like, there's room
Let's
to
not
breathe.
Forget about Thor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Too.
He's got a great arc.
I love his character.
Yes, we've waxed rhapsodic about Thor many times already on this very show. But you know, when you're trying to jam 10 characters into a movie and, like, somehow we're supposed to care about them, and there's all this baggage of all of these, like, huge, like, wacky cosmic concepts that we're supposed to be hanging with at the same time, it's just a mess.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of another criticism critique of the movie I read. It was like somebody likened seeing this movie as if how somebody would feel if they hadn't seen any of the other MCU movies and just watched Endgame.
Sure. Except except it's worse than that, because Endgame is actually a good movie just on its own merits. Like, it would be confusing. It would be confusing, but you would still, like, you could still potentially sit down and only watch Endgame and none of the rest of the MCU and come out of it and say, like, I don't know who any of these people are, but that was a freaking amazing movie.
Yeah, that's true. I think they were kind of looking at it from the frame of just having, like, a dozen characters that you know nothing about, and all of a sudden they're just plopped in your lap, you know? Yeah, sure. You don't know the backstory, and you're not really given anything. Like, because if you go into Endgame, you know, the backstory's there. You know, it's just in all the other movies.
That's really the audacity of Infinity War, right? Is that it absolutely trusts the audience to know what they're doing when they go into that movie theater. Yeah.
And most people did. It worked because they had built the fan following up so much from the other movies that
that's right. They had the buy-in.
Who saw it already knew, you know, had already seen most of the other stuff. So
I really want to talk to somebody who went into Infinity War having not seen any of the other movies.
That would be very interesting. So there was one other thing I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, go for it.
Unless you have something more. about that?
No. I was just thinking there's no way that anybody like that is actually listening to this show, but...
Probably not.
If,
I'm sure
if
there's
you
somebody
are,
like that out there, though.
If you are listening to this show and you happen to know of somebody who did do that, if you managed to wrangle one of your friends to come with you to see Infinity War, even though they had not watched any other Marvel movies, please, I'm begging you, let me talk to that friend.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, what else did you want to say?
So my favorite thing in this sort of paragraph of the mixed reception surprising some commentators was the director herself, like her response to it.
Okay.
So it says Zhao addressed some of the criticisms of the film, believing some of the divisiveness came from everyone, quote, having an existential crisis, unquote, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the film being an, quote, existential crisis both for humanity and God, unquote. She also felt the reactions of the film incorporated her filmmaking sensibilities with Marvel's, were, quote, a testament to how much we had merged with each other, how uncomfortable that might make people feel, unquote. So my response to that
okay,
is,
I get it. It was too much art.
Yeah.
For everybody.
So my response to that was first of all, no. First of all, no. We were not having an existential crisis because of COVID-19. We were having a viral crisis, a pandemic that has nothing to do with an existential. Nobody was, well, maybe somebody was, but most of us were not having an existential crisis from it. We weren't questioning who we were and what we were doing. We knew who we were. We were healthy people who were trying to stay healthy, and we knew what we wanted. We wanted to be able to hang out with our friends again. Like, it's not an existential crisis. And second of all, no, that's not why people didn't like your movie. It wasn't because we're
too stupid to appreciate it.
Well, no, it's like the train of thought seems to be, well, you were having an existential crisis, and the movie's about an existential crisis, therefore you didn't like it. And that is my no, that's not how people work. People love it to find a connection, a personal connection to a movie. That
absolutely.
Is going through, is presenting things that are similar to what they're going through. So if people were having an existential crisis, they would be more likely to like your movie. So no, that is not the reason why.
No.
Yeah. So that was. I just thought that was funny.
That is funny. Like, I just remembered another moment that like I felt was like bad for the movie was when they go to find Gilgamesh and Thena, and like he made the pie, and like they told him Ajak was dead, and like it's so sad, and then the pie drops out of the pan. It's like, what are we doing here? Is it sad, or are we doing some slapstick right now? Like,
yeah. And the humor,
we have no idea what we're doing.
The humor too. It was sort of like it had the form of humor people find appealing, but like the no actual substance of delivery. Like it was the kind of thing where it's like, you should be liking these jokes.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you have it. Eternals. That's pretty much all I had to say on it. I am looking forward to the I hope. I do want to see the sequel. They did say that Eternals will return. I just hope
they're gonna
that it's
tie it
done
in
better.
Yeah, they're probably gonna tie it in with Cersei's love interest is named Dane Whitman, and he is an established character from the comics. He's called Black Knight.
Yes, that was the other thing that made me want to see the sequel, because they introduced it. They waited until 2 hours and 40 minutes into this experience to introduce some actual deep mystery that makes you want to find out what's going on.
Right.
So what character
Yeah.
is he? Because I was going to ask you that, because this is mostly how our conversations go after I watch a movie.
Yes.
Is I will call John and be like, "Who was this character they revealed in the post-credit scene?" You know.
And then I'll talk for a half hour about everything that happened
Yeah.
to that character in the comics.
So tell me who that character is.
Well, we don't have a half hour for it now, but briefly, he's called the Black Knight, and
Okay.
he is the heir to this weapon called the Ebony Blade.
Okay, that's the sword I saw.
That is the sword. It's cursed and it gives power, but it basically simultaneously slightly eats your soul. So
Okay.
yeah, great power, but at a terrible price.
Yeah, one of those.
One of those things. So, and that can be a really compelling and cool story. How far down into the darkness can you go and still be a hero?
Right.
You know, or is it a sacrifice thing that you don't want to, but you have to for the greater good?
Mm-hmm.
Do you end up becoming the villain that you're trying to defeat? There's all sorts of really interesting things that you can do in a story like that. But the voice that speaks to him when he's starting to go for the sword is the guy who's going to play Blade in the MCU.
Oh,
Blade,
interesting.
the vampire.
Yeah.
The semi-vampire. Yeah. Which was actually the first. Blade was the first actual modern movie from Marvel source material. Blade came out before Spider-Man, before the X-Men.
Oh yeah. I remember. I haven't actually seen it. I think I've seen some scenes from it, but I remember when it came out, my dad and stepmom went to see it because they thought it was going to be a movie with swordplay like Zorro. It was not a movie with swordplay like Zorro.
It is most
disgusted.
It is most decidedly not a swordplay movie in the form of Zorro. Yes, there is swords. There are some sword stuff in there, but not like Zorro.
Nope,
not like Zorro at all. No. But 1 and 2 are actually pretty good. I can recommend those ones. 3 is kind of weird.
If I feel like watching something very gratuitously bloody, because that's what I've heard it is, then
yeah. There's a lot of blood. but it's sort of it's in a fairly it's not in an actually super horrifying way,
mm-hmm.
it's pretty cartoonish.
Yeah.
It's not an actual horror movie where
gore fest.
Yeah, and it it is kind of, it's a little bit gory, but again in such a stylized way that it's not revolting in the way that it would be if you were doing realistic violence.
Is it like Spawn
or something? Yeah, a little bit like that.
Because my stepbrother had some Spawn comics, and I always thought they were kind of funny, although full of blood.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that. But Dane Whitman is an interesting character. I'm interested to see how that shakes out. I wouldn't be sad if they mostly abandoned all of that stuff, because just to bring any of that back is just to sort of make the Eternals a more important part of the MCU, and I would just prefer that not to happen.
Well, I wouldn't mind seeing it if like somebody directed it that knew how to tell a story well. Like I wouldn't mind, like, if somebody did it well, I would be very interested, because like I said, it's cool mythology, you know. And it'd be cool to see where they're going, where they could go with it. But yeah.
Yeah, well, and maybe it'll all tie in eventually.
Also, can we talk
with
about
the multiverse
can we
saga.
talk about how at the end, I'm sorry I talked over you. Can we talk about how at the end Icarus flies into the sun for no reason?
It wasn't for no reason. It was because he felt he felt guilty.
I know,
Like,
I understand that, but it also kind of felt like I was watching that going, you know, there's half a dozen other ways you could resolve this.
but like, you have to go for the most obvious thing because Icarus goes into the sun.
Yes, I know. That's why it was making me laugh, because I'm like, oh,
yeah,
that's the only reason they're doing this. I don't know if he did that in the comics, but like, yeah.
No, and like all sorts of other things happen in the comics. It doesn't, like, the only resemblance that this bears to the comics is like in concept, because most of the characters a lot of the characters have been gender swapped. I can't recall if any of them are actually like minorities of any kind. Yeah, like Makari, for instance, is like a blonde dude in the comics.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You know, and Ajak is definitely a guy also. Yeah, there's Thena and Cersei. Yeah. But anyway, so there it is. That's hopefully an hour of us, you know, ripping this thing to shreds was entertaining and enough of that for you all. But as is our wont, we are going to end with some guaranteed good news. And this, once again, I'm going to ask all of you guys listening, if you know of anything that that would be uplifting or cool for the rest of our listeners to hear about, please let me know, because I really want to sort of bring this like closer to our actual community. And, you know, we can find all kinds of good stories, and I have a really nice one to share today. But I do want to just to bring it closer, so that we can sort of, be building more of a community here. And this story is about a fellow named Lamar Johnson. He was in prison for 28 years on a bad murder charge. He did not commit the crime. And he finally was able to meet his pen pal, who faithfully wrote to him through nearly the entire length of his imprisonment, came to all of his court proceedings, and just believed in him the whole time. So I'm sure most of you...
about if they knew each other beforehand, or if this person just like sent him a letter in prison and said he believed him. I don't know.
They did not know each other beforehand.
Oh, that's even more interesting.
Yeah, the letter just arrived in the hands of a congregant of a Mary Mother of the Church in St. Louis County, and it was just addressed to the church, to whoever at the church decided to open it.
Interesting.
And so they struck up a correspondence, and he was eventually proved he was acquitted due to the efforts of the Innocence Project. And that's so cool. Then also they finally got him out, and they put together a GoFundMe and have raised nearly $600,000 as of the time of this article. It was just actually no, it was published today. Yeah, as of today, nearly $600,000 to help him start his life again.
That's awesome.
So, but the other really cool thing is just the attitude of Mr. Johnson. He says he isn't angry about the course of his life, and says if you hold on to anger, you're just going to swap one prison for another.
Oh, that's good.
As much as there was a lot of setbacks over the years, there is a lot to be happy and grateful for. So, yeah, anyway, good things are happening in the world, even though, sort of a lot of our news outlets are incentivized to make us angry and afraid. There's good stuff happening in the world, and we can just rejoice in that.
And if you cut back your social media to only Discord, it's all good things.
That's right. That's right. The power is yours. You can actually materially improve your life by getting off of Facebook and Twitter. But if you do stay on Facebook and Twitter, follow us there at 2Geek Soup. I do have. I do actually have
the foot on that one, John.
I do have a functioning Patreon account for the show right now. There are 3 tiers of support, and at the second tier, you are going to get access to the ability to listen to this show live as it's being recorded. And at the third tier, we're going to have a monthly digital hangout with me and any of the other co-hosts who want to show up for it. And so, yeah, I would really like to not be paying for the hosting of the show all by myself on a continual basis. And like I mentioned when we started this off again with Reed, I do really need to see sort of a level of interest and support for the show if I'm going to keep it running at this point, because there are a lot of other great sort of Christian geek podcasts out there, and so. I would love to keep doing it because this is a lot of fun. I super enjoy it, and I love the feedback that I do get from listeners. But please, if you can, literally take 30 seconds and go give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. And if you have 30 more seconds, just write a quick review too, because that really helps the show's discoverability. If people are looking for things, it's going to pop up more on their searches, and yeah. So anyway, that's going to do it for us here tonight.
Hang on,
Jeff.
one more thing.
Oh yes, what?
Tell people what your other host said when you asked her if she wanted to do the Eternals
Oh
episode.
my gosh, yes! Thank you for reminding me of that. Some of you may remember Michelle Reyes from our episode about Captain Marvel. Honestly, up to this point, still one of the best episodes. I'm really proud of it. That was a great conversation, and I enjoyed it so much that I wanted to have her on to talk about this movie too. And essentially, when I invited her to come and do that, she had already had a conversation on another podcast, and she said that she did not have the stamina for another conversation about the Eternals. So basically, she was like, "I can't even with this movie." So,
good
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. That was a good thing that I did want to mention. But hopefully, I am going to have Michelle back for Maybe we're going to talk about Christian speculative fiction, and that'll be another show about mainly why things suck. and we'll highlight some good stuff too.
Things like, are you talking about, like the Left Behind series? Is that fall
potentially
under
that could
fiction?
Be? Sure. I mean that would be a category, but mainly it would be other stuff like. I don't know. I've read little bits and pieces here and there of like sort of like Christian science fiction.
Okay.
And that kind of tends to not be great.
Yeah.
But that is a whole other
episode.
conversation that we will have at some point. So anyway, again, thanks so much for listening. You can find us again on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at 2GeekSoup. And even though it probably makes me the grumpy janitor, this podcast is a proud member of the More Than One Lesson faculty.